Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Nairobi Health Show with Richard Jacobs. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to interview someone in their car studio. I've never done that before.
This is my beautiful car studio. Yeah. Well, for listeners, I was telling Dave, if I'm at home, my kids may bust in, the dogs may bark. I mean, someone will come and ask me a question. So it's weird, but the car studio is nice and quiet. So no one will bug me probably, unless they tow me away, but it should be all right.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, this is the second podcast I've heard recently where someone was in a car. I was listening to a podcast where the guy said, the only quiet place in my house is actually in my garage in my car. So that's where I'm recording from. So it makes sense to me. Well, listen, everyone, let me read the bio I have for Richard. And I noticed, Richard, that on the screen where you typed your own name, you put Rich. You generally go by Rich.
Yeah, my wife says Richard, but it only sounds right if she says it. So Rich is better.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, Rich is an entrepreneur and a philanthropist. And as part of his journey, he started the Finding Genius podcast in October 2016. And get this, he's interviewed over 3,000 people. That is a ton.
Yeah, a lot of people. Yep.
That's a lot of people, including scientists, engineers, CEOs, CSOs, clinicians, researchers, etc., in dozens of fields. He's touched on everything from cancer to the microbiome to AI, cryptocurrency, 3D printing, quantum computing, health, medicine, aging, everything. And so, I was honored to be on your show, Rich. That was pretty exciting for me to be invited. I guess that the level for genius, maybe the bar isn't that high. I don't know, but I was on the show and in
Everybody says
August of
that,
last year.
Yeah. You did fine. It was good. It was good.
Thank you. It was a fun interview, and it's a fun podcast. And obviously, you've done so many. And as we were chatting before the show, I mentioned to Rich, I'm going to mention this to all of you, that what I find about health that is so fascinating is that sometimes we just need to hear the right thing at the right time. And a small tip or nugget or idea can change our life and set us on a whole new positive and better course than we've been on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I really see where you've probably experienced just a ton of value for yourself and for those and for your listeners. Rich, when you have these experts on and they're discussing these ideas, and as human beings, there's another principle that I believe, and I'm not sure if there's a psychological term or any research on this, but it just makes common sense. We all have to be ready for a thing, you know,
Right.
and sometimes we hear really great ideas, but they bounce off us because we're just not prepared. It's just not the right time in our life.
Well, anyone in a relationship has experienced this where you realize something and you tell your partner and they go, "I told you this like a year ago." What? Oh, you listen to them and not me? Oh, so, so it's very common, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's why I find your story so fascinating because 3,000. Now, what is that? Are you doing like a few a week? How do you get 3,000 interviews in?
Yeah, now I clustered them on Mondays and Fridays. I'll do like 6 each. Sometimes people fall out, so I'll do 4 or 5. But for a little while, I was really going crazy. I was doing it every day, like 6, 7 hours a day, and it was too much. So I scaled back and scaled back. So I'm only doing 10 or 12 episodes a week lately, Monday and Friday.
Wow. Is this your full-time gig?
No, I have plenty of time to do other stuff. I don't usually need to do any preparation before I talk to the guest. I'll look at their bio and I'll get on and I'll ask them, just tell me about your background and what you do. And because my questions aren't pre-scripted, depending on what they say, I just ask them questions based on that. So I don't need a script and I don't usually need to prepare. We just talk and I ask questions about stuff. And I am genuinely interested in all my guests while I talk to them. So it makes it easy to ask questions because I am genuinely curious about what they do,
Okay, fascinating. And basically, all I want to do, Rich, is kind of pick your brain on what are some of those most interesting things or surprising things, or just things that you've heard that you thought were so powerful that maybe you weren't even aware of before you heard them
Hmm.
from that particular interesting guest. So maybe we could just start there with kind of a top of mind. What comes to mind when we talk about, let's talk about surprising.
Okay.
First, what are some things that you've heard on your podcast from some of these geniuses that surprised you?
Well, I'll tell you. So when I start on a new industry, I'll interview people, and the first 5 or 10 interviews, I'm getting my feet. I'm learning the vocabulary and how the industry is. And as I keep going, once I get up to 20, 30, then I really start to know what I'm doing, and I'm asking better and better questions. And
Okay.
once I get to 100, some industries I've done 100+ interviews. Now I really know what I'm doing. And the people go, how do you know this? How'd you ask this? Or, do you want to come work for us? Or are you an insider? But you talk to enough people in an industry, you learn more and more and more, and you get better at it, and you ask better questions. And I've noticed most of the people I interview are pretty good, but every once in a while, within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, whoa, this person's like incredible. The stuff they're saying is way beyond what I've heard anyone else say. So I've
Ah,
learned no matter what industry it is, about 95% of people will be good and competent and licensed. 5% are really good. And, like 0.1% are like, you could just hear it in the first 5 minutes. You're like, wow, this person is freaking amazing at what they do. And then I'm excited because then you get the real good stuff from those people. But you got to find them.
in health, who are some of those people that come to mind that you've interviewed?
Um, so in health, you get two kinds of people. Usually you get like clinicians, doctors, and people that work with actual patients. And then you get researchers. So I've noticed the researchers usually will be a lot more open, and they'll be a lot more willing to talk about stuff. The doctors, they have to follow their protocols and their standards, and they're not usually going to know nearly as much as the researchers. But if you get a
Right.
doctor that's helped thousands of people with a certain condition, then I'm going to ask him some of that same stuff. Tell me about like cases that really mystified you, or that you had to really rack your brain to solve, or ones that surprised you. And sometimes you'll get interesting tidbits from them. Researchers, it's kind of easier. They're less pressured to say only the right things and not stray from it. So they're more usually likely to tell you interesting stuff. And sometimes I'll interview like real high end people, like someone's the chief scientific officer for like ABC Pharmaceuticals, but those aren't usually as good because they're muzzled. They can't say a lot of what they're working on is proprietary, and they've also undergone media training. So they tend to like say, "Oh, that's a very good question, but I think a better question is blah blah blah," and they take you off path. So if someone allows me and they're willing to speculate and be open and answer questions, then we really have a good conversation and we have fun. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well, I'm just kind of looking for some of those tips, ideas that you've gleaned
mm.
from those people that are more open.
Oh, I'll get
So
technical with you in a second.
yeah,
Okay, so this comes from a story of my wife has issues with diabetes, so she takes metformin and
okay.
she's not feeling well. So I look up the drug, and there's a phenomena called drug induced nutrient depletion, meaning you take a drug, whatever it is, over time, it depletes X, Y, or Z. And if you don't know that, you'll start to feel like worse and worse and worse on certain drugs because you don't
Right.
realize it. So she's taking metformin. She starts not feeling good. I look it up, and I asked 1 or 2 people I know, and they said, oh, it depletes vitamin B12. So I tell her, she calls the doctor. The doctor goes, oh, yeah, there's a paper or two on that. Yeah, thanks, doc. So I tell her, supplement
Wow.
with B12. She supplements, she feels a lot better. A friend of mine, he's on some, I don't know if it's a blood thinner or what it was. The name of the drug I won't say, but I look it up with him, and it depletes melatonin. So I said, oh, your sleep has probably gone to hell. And he goes, yeah, it has. So I said, go get melatonin immediately. And then it depletes CoQ10, this coenzyme. So he's like, oh, I supplement with it. I said, that's fine. But there's other cofactors and coenzymes that may support CoQ10. So look it up. And he found some other factor that is in the chain of production of CoQ10. He supplemented with that, and he felt worlds better. So that's one tip I learned is like anytime you take a drug, look
Yeah.
for drug induced nutrient depletion and fix that, and you'll have a much better time on that drug. Because sometimes you'll think, oh no, it's not working for me, or I'm having these terrible side effects or whatever. You do that, it may fix it. It may. Just depends.
It's super interesting you said that and that you came up with those particular things because, first of all, I love that tip. That's really interesting. And as a matter of fact, I've got a woman, a nurse practitioner, coming on my show. And
Mhm.
we're going to do a show that the show will be entitled um, "Over Medicated, Undereducated."
Mhm.
And Pamela John Williams, I believe is her name.
Okay.
Anyways, that's her expertise. Is from her experience as a nurse practitioner, she's absolutely convinced that what you just said of too many prescriptions being given out without all the knowledge that a person would need and how it's going to affect their overall health. It's a great topic. And then interestingly, a lot of people, when they take a supplement, they're looking for an effect. They think of supplements, unfortunately, somewhat like drugs. I'm going to take this for 2 weeks and see how I feel.
Right.
And some supplements simply don't really do that. They're good for you and they're making a difference in your body, but your body was compensating without them, and there's not that big of an effect. Some of the ones you mentioned, we actually have in our Mimi's Miracle Multi: CoQ10, B12, zinc, and chromium are 4 examples that are really interesting, because those are ones that often people really feel a difference. We often get people who start taking our multi and give us a great review.
Nice.
Say, this really works. I love this. Well, what I've learned over the years is it may not be the synergistic effect of the multi, that if they're deficient in one of those things, like your wife was deficient in B12, B12 is a big one. If you're deficient and you start taking B12, it wakes up your system like crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Whereas another deficiency, magnesium, calcium, are a couple of examples, you might not even feel, because your body is compensating for the calcium deficiency by extracting stuff from your bones, right? Which is not good, but it's getting by, but it can't make up for a D deficiency of B12. So that one's super interesting to me, and super interesting that you mentioned those particular vitamins.
Well, there's more to it too. So most drugs or even supplements are tested on men. A woman has her monthly cycle. Yeah. So what happens if I'm taking XYZ pill? I'm at the beginning of my cycle. Now I'm at the middle. Now I'm at the end. And you may feel okay the first week, horrible the next, and overstimulated the third. I mean, who knows? So women especially, they need to know, because there's not really much data on it. Okay, I'm taking this. Where am I at in my cycle? They really need to track it and how they feel, because they may feel very different and they won't attribute it to the drug they're taking. And then they may take the wrong action or think it doesn't work, or who knows. So that's one thing. If you gain weight or you lose weight while you're taking a drug, well, the dose is dependent upon your mass. So if you're gaining or losing significant weight, it could make the dose too high or too low. That's something to point out. The seasonality can affect it too. In the winter, things get drier and colder. That may cause your metabolism to respond in a different way, and the drug will affect you, good or bad. There's just a lot of different factors that people don't think about. They just want to pop a pill. Either it works or it doesn't work, and they don't think any more deeply into it. And you really have to be your own doctor and think about this stuff and see what's going on. Is this working? Is it not? What do I feel? Why all of a sudden am I feeling like this and feeling different, et cetera? It's important to think about that.
I like that. And it's important to do that for long enough. One of the things that I do personally is when I make a health change, I'll usually, first of all, research it, make sure it's something that I think I'm going to, stick with and think is a great idea before I do it. But then I'll give myself at least 90 days, and sometimes 6 months, depending on what it is. And I find that a lot of people don't do that. As a matter of fact, I'm always like with our own back to reviews of Nairobi products, right? It's always disappointing to me when someone leaves a review after a week. And frankly, whether it's positive or negative, I mean, obviously as a business owner, I'm excited for all positive reviews. I'm grateful. But the reviews that happen over time are more meaningful. I imagine from some of the, and in science, of course, you've interviewed a lot of scientists. They tend to do studies for at least 60 days, 90 days, even on animal studies, rats and mice and whatnot.
Right.
What's your take on that? Do you feel like too many people are doing their experimentation, not giving themselves enough time? And if so, how much time do you think you give yourself on a personal health experiment?
It depends. I mean, if you take a new drug and it's causing you horrible effects after day 2, you can't wait 60 days. You got to cut it out immediately. So sometimes you don't have the luxury to do that. I've noticed between drugs and supplements, drugs are like a punch, like supplements are much more subtle, and you got to look for that. You got to be patient, and the effect won't be as strong, but it also won't have the downside for you. I've taken drugs where, you feel like amped and really good. And then when you're let down, you feel like absolute garbage. Supplements never do that to me. So it's a completely different class of thing that you're doing. I would also look at your diet. Is your diet changing at the same time that you're adding this medication? If so, it could throw everything off. Another thing too is generic drugs versus prescription. So there was a book written by Catherine Eban called Bottle of Lies, and she looked at the generic drug industry. So some of these drugs, let's say you get them from Costco, and nothing wrong with Costco, but Costco may buy XYZ pill from China this month, and next month they get a 2-cent discount and they buy it from India. The Chinese company, maybe you need 500 milligrams of X. The Chinese company, you may be getting 1,000 milligrams of X. They may not have it dialed in properly. Then you switch to the India version. You have no clue. It says same pill on the box, and you're getting 0 of X, 0 milligrams. So it could really, really mess you up. If you can afford it, you want to go non-generic. If you can't, you got to make sure you get it from a stable source and keep track of that, because again, you may think, what's going on? Why am I feeling like this? And the doctor will say, well, you're taking ABC. That hasn't changed, so it can't be that, but it has. You don't realize that. Even with supplements too, I've seen this with probiotics. Some supplements, the way they store them, transport them, I don't know, it does nothing. Some of them, you take it, you're like, whoa, this is working, but you can't see that. And some of the supplements too that you take, depending on the brand and all that, where it's manufactured, it may say you have these 4 things in it, but there may be nothing of number 3 and nothing of number 2. You just don't know. So all these factors make it really, really difficult sometimes to figure out, will the supplement work for me if I have the right one? Or is it the supplement itself? Or is it my weight? Or is it, a nutrient I'm depleted in? So that's what I want people to contemplate. I don't want them to feel overwhelmed, but there are a lot of factors. If something's not working, don't just say, I give up. Start looking at these other factors, and perhaps that may be the reason why it's not working for you.
Okay, excellent. One of the areas of expertise that you have and an interest that you have is in treatments for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. So can you give us a little update on the state? Those are big issues. They're in the news. There's a lot of research going on. There's new research going on drugs that have been banned for 40 and 50 years, and those are coming back now, and clinical studies are starting again. What's the current state of the research in that area?
Well, a lot of people will take traditional drugs, SSRIs. They work for some people, they don't work for others. Some people they make far worse. They make them suicidal. Some people it fixes them. So again, people that are anxious, depressed, have PTSD, they may try these drugs, and again, they may work for a few weeks and stop working. They may not work. They may work, whatever. But if it's not working for you, now you're like, now what do I do? So in the area of anxiety and depression, PTSD, I've come up with an analogy of what I call like the hole. Okay, so 0 is you're on the surface. 10 is you're so deep down in this hole that you can't even get out of bed, for instance. So what I've seen with anxiety, depression, PTSD is we need to find a way to help take the edge off, to get me from an 8, 9, 10 up to maybe a 5, 6, 7. Now I'm not like so down in this hole that I can't even shower. I can't even get on the phone. I can't even leave my apartment. Now I'm still not feeling good, but at least I can get up and get moving and doing stuff. So I've seen that people really need that. I've been very anxious before too. I've been very depressed. I had thyroid cancer 4 years ago. When I was told that, my insides liquefied. Obviously, I was pretty anxious and depressed. So people in those states, they need something to take the edge off. Maybe it's going for a walk in the sun, or maybe it's doing like a simple, literally 5-minute meditation or breathing exercise, or this stuff called tapping, that helps people to relax. But people need to find that first, and then they'll have the presence of mind to figure out how to help themselves better. But if they're real deep down, you're in a place where it's almost impossible to really help yourself because you're just so bad off. I've learned people, depression, anxiety, and all that's really pernicious. Like a lot of people will hear voices in their head. Like, let's say you're really depressed. I'm like, hey, Dave, you're looking good today. In your mind, you'll be like, no, I'm not. I look terrible. No one likes me. You literally have like a devil on your shoulder saying stuff to you. And people don't realize that with people in this condition. which makes it a lot harder. And then people in this condition will crave bad foods a lot. There's many reasons for that, but they'll crave Coca-Cola or they'll crave donuts or whatever. They eat that. Now they feel even worse and even more depressed. And they're not realizing why it's happening. And now they're even deeper in the hole. So anxiety and depression is I've been studying it for a while. I have family members that have issues with it. I mean, it's everywhere. The past 2 years, based on this virus whole situation, it is exploded. I see it everywhere and everyone's having problems. So it's a real important issue to address. And these are just a few of the things I'm finding to help people.
The tapping is something my chiropractor told me about a while ago. And I got to be honest, I just kind of dismissed it as kind of a woo-woo kind of a thing. But I mean, it just sounds kind of strange, tap yourself in certain places and it makes a difference. But you mentioned it. I mean, have you found that this is actually an effective method for people?
Yeah, for myself and not everybody, but it takes the edge off. Okay. If I feel really anxious or angry, I'll be 10% less. And sometimes that is enough for me to think clearly. Okay. If you think back to a time in your life where you were pissed or you were really upset or you were super anxious, it's hard to function. And if I just took the edge off of that, you can have the presence of mind to be like, okay, I'm really, really angry today. I need to go for a walk or do something to help myself, or I better not take it out on my spouse or my kids. But if you're not, and you're in that state, that manic state, you're going to do and say bad things and you hurt yourself, hurt other people, whatever. So that's critical. What else would I say? I mean, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but keep going. We'll talk more about it.
Yeah, no, you did. I mean, and this is the type of thing where there's some pretty, it's quite simple to do tapping. I imagine there's just a video on YouTube or something people could find to figure out how to do it, right?
Yep. One of the big guys, his name is Nick Ortner. He's got a whole series on YouTube, and it's not going to hurt you. You're sitting there and you're saying stuff like, I'm feeling anxious and it's okay. I'm feeling that. And then I'm feeling, literally you're going through this series of taps and it's weird. You feel a little bit calmer when you're done. Again, it's not like magic. Oh, my depression's gone, my anxiety. You're not going to get that. But again, it's a little bit of help gets you through. That's what these things tend to do. They're not solutions, but they help.
Good. And I like that framing. That makes sense to me. And because there's another one that I kind of dismissed as woo-woo a while back, but now I do it every day. It's called brain yoga. Are you familiar with that one?
No, I haven't heard about that one.
It's where
Tell me about it.
You hold your right earlobe with your left hand and your left earlobe with your right hand standing up, and you just go into a squat.
Okay.
And you just breathe and squat, and you just do a few squats. And they've done apparently research on school children in elementary school, have them stand by their desk. They all hold their earlobes, they do squats. And apparently it calms people down and it has a relaxing, soothing, and it kind of picks you up neurologically. And I've just worked it into my warm-up routine. Mm-hmm. And so you feel kind of silly, if other people could see you working out and you're holding your earlobes.
Right.
And honestly, I couldn't tell you whether it's just the, picking up the blood flow and a little more oxygen to your brain from doing the squats. For all I know, just doing the squats might do the same thing. I have no idea. Right. But because it's simple to do, I just do it. And I do feel good after. It does kind of just give you a quick pick me up.
That's great. Well, think about it. When you were saying EFT sounds weird to you, but if you think about it, acupuncture, you're putting a needle into a point. Acupressure, you're pressing on a point. Tapping, you're tapping on a point. And a lot of them are the same points in your body. So because I know about these other modalities, it makes sense. Why wouldn't tapping work?
Sure.
A needle works. Pressure works. Why wouldn't tapping work? It's not that different. There's also cupping, blah, blah. But the idea of points in your body and also the interconnectedness of it. So I can see why, if your right brain, left brain, and the right brain controls the left side and vice versa, if you're scrambling stuff and you're doing things like that while you're doing some exercise, it may be challenging your brain a little bit more, and that gets you kind of out of your mode. Some exercises you'll stand on a vibration board. Have you ever done that?
I have one.
Why does that help? Why does it help? So it's just the physical and the medical are intimately tied together. Like one funny thing I've heard, I just can't believe this. I've heard this from so many medical professionals. Oh, diet doesn't matter. What's the only thing? What's the only thing that keeps you alive? Let's say you live to be 90. What's the only thing that's kept you alive for 90 years? Food, water, air you breathe. But no, they have nothing to do with your health. Okay, you know? So people need to be a little bit more open-minded. Don't, you know, if this thing works and you stand in this position and it makes you feel better, so what? Do it. At least you're not taking a pill. You're not getting surgery. You're not cutting yourself. You're not undergoing some crazy medical procedure, which is, let's say, irreversible. These are simple things, and yet people are trained to be like, "Oh no, that's woo woo. I won't do that. I won't deal with that." You know, I think it's a mistake.
It's absolutely bizarre. I mean, if these same people were mechanics and you brought in your car that wasn't running, and you're like, "Yeah, I wanted to save money, so I've been putting water in my gas tank," they'd say,
Right.
"Well, you idiot, this is why your engine's shot."
Exactly right.
But then you make that person a doctor, and how they can stand there and tell you that what you put into your body doesn't matter. I just don't get it. I think it's changing. I think it got to the point of ridiculousness. And I think there's been some embarrassment that just, you know, your average person can have more common sense than someone who has a 13-year degree. And that it just makes too much common sense that what we put in our body actually creates what the cells of our body are made of. And when someone tells us otherwise, it just is so bizarre. Say, well, eat whatever you want, but take this drug. And also, we all know people who have reversed their own diabetes, and that story is becoming more and more common. And the fact that people have done that, and that the medical profession in some circles is oblivious to that and denies it, is also, you know, beyond common sense. You know, type 2 diabetes. So
I've been to there's a summit called the Metabolic Health Summit. A lot of it's on cancer, and I went and I run into people. I had pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 14 years ago. Doctor said I should be dead after 6 months. Nice to meet you. I've had a brain tumor twice, a glioblastoma that usually kills everyone. It's been 12 years. Nice to meet you. I met a lot of people, dozens of people that tell me the same story. I've interviewed a lot of people. That's also same story. Here's the avatar. So-and-so gets stricken, or their family member gets stricken with the disease. Doctors say there's nothing you can do. They go to everybody. They try everything. They say, I've got to become the expert in it. They research the heck out of it. They cure themselves or whoever it is in their life that had the problem. And now they want to help other people with that same problem. I've heard that story at least 50 times of every condition you could think of. So where do these people come from? Is it all BS? No, I don't think so. I've seen it. I've heard it many, many, many times. There are alternative ways to things if you want to research it. I'm not saying don't do the normal medical stuff. Don't do the standard of care. I would never advise against that. It'd be very bad for me if I did. But also consider alternatives. Don't just listen to people that say, "Oh no, this is the only way to do it." Don't even look at that, or don't let people dismiss and say, "Oh, that's anecdotal evidence." Well, hey, if I do a clinical trial of 50 people, and that's real evidence, but I have 5,000 people in my clinic that tell me why, yeah, it's anecdotal, but I have a heck of a lot more evidence from the people in my clinic. Am I going to throw away 5,000 accounts because they're what's called anecdotal in exchange for this study that was super narrow and you probably haven't even read, and it had maybe a cohort of 30 people, 50 people?
It's so difficult. I love studies, but the fact is you do have to know who paid for the study, why was the study done? And the fact is many of the studies that we really need are never going to get done because there's no money in it. Right. So unfortunately, as much as, you know, and there are great, like in my world, there's a ton of great studies. There's all kinds of studies on vitamins and on mineral supplementation, food. We do have that. And that's great. And those studies I'm very interested in, you know, but when you get into some of these other studies, and like you mentioned earlier, this is a really interesting point that most studies are done on men. I don't know why that is. I've heard theories that, for example, men are more likely to show up for a clinical study for whatever reason. But I know that in the realm of intermittent fasting, which is a huge health trend at the moment.
Mm.
90 to 95% of all the studies first done on intermittent fasting were done on men. And then,
Okay.
like you said, that gets announced. Hey, the study was done. And they don't say on men. They just say a study was done and the average person lost 15 pounds in this study.
Right.
And they were eating all their food within a 6-hour window. But then a woman 30 years old with 2 children does the exact same thing and
Mm.
finds out all it did is mess up her hormones after 6
Right.
weeks because like you said, it's about cycles, hormones, and the studies are now being done on women. And there's apps like Wild AI and other apps that help women understand not only how to cycle through their diet,
Right.
but through how many carbs they take and when, and when to extend their eating window, and everything like that. And so, and I'm not bringing that up just as a gender issue between studies done on men and women, but for all of us to understand that when you hear a study, you got to go look up that study. You got to, if you're going to make lifestyle changes based on a study, it is well worth your time to go find it and at least read the abstract.
But here's the problem too. It took me a year of reading these things. They were gobbledygook at first. I understood like 5% of them, but because I really wanted to learn it and I spent time reading and reading, now I can understand, at least in certain fields, like 70, 80% of it, but it's not easy. Those studies, like, first of all, finding them and understanding what they're saying and then being able to read them, it's, there's a lot more to it than just that.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I'm the same way. When I get past the summary, it is absolutely gobbledygook. What was the word? Gobbledygook.
Gobbledygook.
Gobbledygook. And very difficult to understand. Happily, like a lot of the studies are published at NIH.org in health and NIH.gov, sorry. And I do find that the summaries are really valuable because I find that the scientists try to make the summary understandable to a layperson.
Right.
And so
Sometimes.
Right. That's true too. Not all the time. Sometimes they want to geek out for their scientific friends.
Right. Well, in order to get through peer review, sometimes the studies are massively changed, where they have to be rewritten. Peer review is not this virtuous, honest, anonymous team of people that are reviewing your paper. There's a lot of politics to it. And I've seen a lot of people where they have a paper and it's kicked out of peer review. They won't approve it because it doesn't go with what that journal wants to put forth, or they're getting pressure, whatever. You can call it conspiracy theory, whatever you want. I don't care. But I've seen many, many examples of this, or papers that have to be modified quite a bit in order to make it through peer review. Bob is on my peer review committee, and I didn't approve his paper 6 months ago. He's never going to let it through because he's pissed off at me.
Oh, wow.
So the words peer review hide a lot of political type stuff that people don't know about.
I had no idea. I never even thought about that.
Yep. So
interesting.
Yeah, I know scientists where, let's say there's 5 people in the peer review. One of them like so strongly is against the paper that the journal's like, we can't publish it. You have to totally change it, or we just can't have you publish it because for some reason, one person on the review board is like, no, this is ridiculous. It's wrong. It's blah, 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 blah. And it's just sometimes it's a battle, and sometimes papers never get published. I've seen it happen.
Okay, so, and I've kept you for quite a while. Maybe we should end on this because I want to make it really practical. Like here we are. You've interviewed 3,000 people. You do this, inside baseball research on studies, and you've got all these different interests. And in the end, what we've just painted is a very difficult to navigate area where health can be hard to understand. Now, in my coaching, I try to keep things dead simple. We have the 7 principles of our undiet, for example, where we talk about drinking water and eating the basic foods, carbs, fats, protein, and we try to keep it really simple. And we have also talked about anecdotal evidence and having your own plan. So given all these things that you've discovered about studies, about the difficulty of things, about the fact that some of the experts in our lives that we really want to trust don't even give us all the information that we need. How does a person come up with something that works, that they can rely on?
I would say first thing is, what kind of a problem do you have? Do you have a 95% problem where you go to anyone in the field and you'll be okay? Or do you have a more difficult 5% problem? Or God forbid, do you have a 0.1% problem? Well, if you got a real badass problem that is not the norm for whatever condition it is, you're unlikely to find a doctor that's going to be able to help you. You're going to have to go through a lot of doctors. You're going to have to probably go through at least 100, which is crazy. If you got a real difficult problem, either you're going to have to solve it yourself, or you're going to have to go through a ton of different practitioners to get the right one, just because of the nature of these percentages. These percentages always hold. I don't care if you're a plumber, an oncologist, a belly dancer, whatever it is in every single field on earth, I guarantee you. So I think that would be the number one thing, is what kind of a problem do I have? Is it a real serious, real pernicious one, or is it run of the mill? And that will guide you on what you have to do.
Okay. And then as you say that, I think of the people, there's quite a large group of people out there that say things like, I've tried everything.
Mm-hmm.
I tried everything, and this is where it is. And half the time, you know, when you scratch the surface just a little bit, they haven't talked to 100 people, like you just mentioned.
Right.
They've convinced themselves, what they're really saying is, I've tried all that I'm willing to try. But what you're saying is, be really open to, you know, really put in a lot of effort to that. You know, these problems are worth solving. Health problems are worth solving. And what you're suggesting is, from your research, you believe that there probably is someone out there that can help a person, even with the worst possible condition, if they're willing to put in enough effort.
I've seen it. A friend of mine, he's 70. He got acute myeloid leukemia. The doctor told him death rate 100%. He is now completely in remission. He fixed himself in about 100 days. This guy's been a naturopath for 25 years. He knows a ton more than I do, and he fixed himself. How did he do that? And as you hear, we don't know how he did it. We've never seen this before, blah, 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 blah. Almost anything, I think, can be at least improved beyond what you're going to get. If you just leave it to, if you just go to one doctor and you just leave it to them, and you don't act as your own advocate, you don't try to help yourself, you don't research, I'm sorry, you're not going to get the best result you can get. And if you got a serious problem, you must do this for yourself. If you don't, the problem's not going to go away. Serious problems require serious commitment and action and research. I'm sorry, it just has to be. When I had cancer, I had to go, you know, to the wall and figure out everything possible on what to do. I couldn't just say, I'll just do chemo and radiation and blah, blah, blah. You know, you can't just do that unless you want a really good result. You've got to push and figure stuff out. Your life may be at stake. You've got to do it.
I love that. And that's a nice way to end the episode. Other than, I have one question I like to ask all my guests. And
Sure.
And Richard, it's a personal question.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned at the beginning that many times the right person or the right thought or the right tip comes along that can really make a major difference in our life. And you have overcome some major life challenges that have killed people, right? And you're still alive. You're here. Can you share with us a personal story of when you were at a low point, when you were, had something really, really difficult to deal with, where a person came along at the right time and helped you to rise up, where you were ready, and the right person or book or expert showed up and helped you make that major uplifting, you know, life-changing improvement?
Well, I'll go for something actually unexpected and kind of minor to most people. You know, obviously I'm not the skinniest person in the world. I've been heavy all my life to various degrees. So 20 years ago, I wanted to jog and run, and I would try it, and I was like dying. My friend Miguel, he's like, come run with me, and we're going to run so slow, you're barely jogging. And I was like, that's not going to do anything. He goes, trust me. We ran so slow, I was barely jogging. I ran for a half hour. I wasn't out of breath. And I was like, wow, this is kind of fun. It's not terrible or anything. He goes, yeah, let's just keep doing it. Go super, super slow. Just ease your way into it. And in college, I got to a point where I was running like 5 miles 3 or 4 times a week because I started really, really slow. And a friend of mine, we kind of make fun of him. When I started running, he would run, and he ran like real fast. And we're like, his name was Ron. I'm like, Ron, you got to slow down. And he's like, no, I'm trying to shock my heart. So sure enough, an eighth of a mile up the road, he's like laying on the side of the road, and we jog by him. We're like, shock our heart. And we teased him about that for years, and he never ran again. And we all kept running, my friends and I and all that. And I got in pretty good shape at the time, and he gave up. So it was just sometimes like the littlest thing is just continually applied a little bit. Like, let's say you wanted to get in better leg strength. Do 3 squats a day. Then maybe go to 5, maybe 10. Even if you just do that, it'd be a huge effect over time. And with physical fitness and working out, I realized like every workout you do is another workout you've done. You got to think about it that way. I've done 7 workouts this year. Now I've done 15 workouts this year. Now I've done 30. Now I've done 40. And it just builds up one at a time. And if you're in trouble, you're not feeling well, or you want to accomplish some goal, break it down into tiny pieces and just start doing the pieces, and you'll be absolutely shocked on how you get there.
I love that. Well, thank you. And slow and steady really does win the race. That's what you discovered there.
Unless you want to shock your heart. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe going real slow, but getting the job done is better than shocking your heart and quitting, obviously.
Exactly.
So yeah. Cool. Well, Rich, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been fun. We've been all over the map with the stories and direction we've gone, but it's just been fun to explore these ideas and have these different things come up. And I really love a major takeaway I'm taking from this, and I hope others do too, is to recommit to our personal health. I mean, when you just laid it out there, like people with really serious issues, how they need to just take it more seriously and step it up and not give up, and how that can lead to literally overcoming life-changing, debilitating, awful situations. And you've seen that time and time again. I think that's really inspiring and could give hope to people who may have given up too early.
Yeah, I have a lot of people that say, oh, I'm old. That's what happens when you get old. Or, oh, it's age. Bullshit. Sorry to curse. Or it's BS. I know people that are 70, 80 that are working out and in good shape. And I know people that are 50 that are in a wheelchair half dead. What's your choice? Who are you going to be? And I realized every day of your life, you can make that choice. Am I looking ahead to being an invalid, or am I looking ahead to being in great shape and shocking everyone around me? And they're like, not doing, and I'm still fit at like 80, let's say. It's doable, it's possible, and everyone needs to think about that.
Okay. Well, with that, Rich, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been terrific.
Thanks, Dave. No problem.
Okay. And for those of you listening, this is Dave Sherwin wishing you health and success.